You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. This episode of Arcane Carolinas Case Files comes from the Upstate Spirits Conference in Abbeville, South Carolina, and features 3 guests. The first is Mary Deese Hampton, who right now, as I edit this episode, has a role in episode 6 of the Netflix show Blockbuster. You probably also know her from Claws, Bosch, Lady Dynamite, all kinds of things. I'm going to do a little intro for each of the other guests as well, but for now, let's dive right into the interview with Mary Deese Hampton. And thanks for listening.
You guys are live. If you need to stop and redo something, just say it on the recording, like, stop, please edit that out, or whatever.
Okay. This is Jessie Mushaw. Not one of the co-hosts of Arcane Carolinas, but subbing in at the Belmont Inn during our weekend in Abbeville, South Carolina. And today I'm here with
Mary Deese Hampton,
who is here at the conference and has agreed to come on and tell us a little bit more about herself. And we're very excited to have you. It was nice chatting with you earlier. So Mary, just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it was nice meeting you, and I hope you're having a fun time here. I sure am. I am an actor and hail from the Texas, great state of Texas. And I was married to an actor named James Hampton. He passed away last year. Great guy. We had a good run. We were married for 20 years. I knew him for about 28 years. We were great friends first. He had just a prolific career in television and film. He was in all the westerns back in the mid to late 60s. He started as a series regular on F Troop, and then he moved to the Doris Day Show, and he just was in everything. We used to do a lot of Comic-Cons and nostalgia festivals and things like that, and some of the bigger parts that people would know him from would be, he was the dad in Teen Wolf. Mm-hmm. He was a caretaker in the original Longest Yard. He was the warden in Sling Blade. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, he was Mr. Malatesta in Full House. He, Humps. He was Sheriff Buster Moon on Dukes of Hazzard. He just had a career that spanned almost 50 years.
I was going to say, it sounds like a very rich career.
Yes. Yeah. He was a very grateful man. He ended up directing the last 12 years we were in LA. He directed Disney, Smart Guy, Sister, Grace Under Fire, Evening Shade, Boston Common, just a lot of shows. Mm-hmm. And just enjoyed it. And he was who we would call, as an actor, an actor's director. Mm-hmm. And that means somebody who has been on our side of the camera, who mm-hmm. kind of, it's good because I think directors kind of give us more freedom. In a sense, I mean,
they know what it's like to be on the other side of it.
And they have their, director will, has their vision, mm-hmm. but who knows? I mean, actor might come up with something better, mm-hmm. right?
Sure.
So anyhow, now I'll never work in that town again after having said that. But anyway, no. So so I'm here with a lot of his pre-signed photos and DVDs and things like that. He unfortunately passed away from Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. And so we'd probably do 10 to 15 of these shows a year for about 10 years. And the last couple of years, he would get tired. And mm-hmm. so he pre-signed a lot of things so that he could still go and enjoy his fans, and his fans would enjoy him. And yet, he had things that were pre-signed he could sign over. And it was at one of these events that we met Keith H., the mm-hmm. rock and roll ghost hunter.
Uh-huh.
And
who I had the pleasure of meeting this morning.
Oh, he's a doll. Mm-hmm. He looks gruff and tough, but what a doll. But anyway, we were at a show, and And we met Keith, and I had always been interested in the paranormal. And Jimmy, he loved me so much he'd do anything I asked him to do. So he was willing to go on ghost hunts with me, and he always.
So I want to pause for a
Yes.
second. I want to know about when in your life did this start? It sounds like you were always interested in the paranormal,
Yes.
but when did you say, I'm interested, and now I'm kind of in this world a little bit because I'm going to these different cons where I'm around, I'm meeting some of the people in this world. And when did you finally make that move to like, I want to go on some of these things. I really want to get in here.
Well, I'd been wanting to, but I didn't have any friends who would do it with me. And so I went on my first ghost hunt after we met Keith. He had put us together with a woman named April Slaughter, who was at that time out of the Dallas area. And of course, if he recommended her, she was reputable. So we did some investigations with her and just had a great time. And
This was you and James together?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great. So you're doing that as partners, which I love. Yep.
Yes, and we'd go to the investigations, or we'd be at a horror sci-fi show, and Jim would do an interview, and people would ask him, well, did you ever have a paranormal experience? And he said, yeah. And well, what was it? And he was in college, and at the time he was in Denton, Texas, at the University of North Texas, and Denton County was dry, and so if you wanted alcohol, you had to drive to Fort Worth or Dallas to get it. And so he and his buddy hopped in his buddy's new convertible, and they drove to Fort Worth, and on the way back, they were pretty inebriated, and Jimmy thought it would be a great idea to throw beer cans at the police station. And so
I don't see any problems with this story.
and sure enough,
Seems fine.
Here they come. And so he gets hauled off to the chief, and then the chief says, how much money do you have on you, Hampton? He says, $1.40, sir. And he says, well, that's your fine, but you've got to do 100 hours of community service. And he says, well, what do I have to do? And he says, well, you're going to mow the cemetery.
Oh, gosh.
And so Jim thought, hey, I got off pretty light. And he got to thinking about it, and he said, I don't want my buddies and my fraternity brothers to see me mowing a cemetery, And so he thought, okay, I'm going to do it under the cover of darkness. I'm going to go, at midnight or something and mow the city. Back then you had these, this is like 1956, and they had those push mowers with the round, it was a round blades or whatever. And
I think we still have one at our house.
so he's out there, grrr, 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 going along, and all of a sudden, here come the lights, and he looks up, and there's two police officers there, and they shine the flashlight on him, and one of them says, Hampton, is that you? And he says, yes, sir. And he said, well, what are you doing out here? And he says, I'm doing my community service. And there was silence, and then they started laughing, and the policeman said, get out of here. Come to find out, a woman who lived in a house across the street from the cemetery had called the police station and said, there's a ghost in the cemetery, and you'll never guess what it's doing. So he said,
we got to put him to work. Look, if you're going to be there, grab the lawnmower.
Right. So he said, in my paranormal experience, I was the ghost.
Okay. All right. So not a true paranormal experience, but did he have any others?
He had a younger brother who was 9 years younger than he. He had a brother that was 4 years older, and then Jimmy came along, and they were real close, and then all of a sudden here came Dan. So he always referred to Dan as the love child, and so his brother passed away of a burst esophagus, and his mom, he had come home from the hospital to recover, and his mom, he got pneumonia, and his mom was a respiratory therapist, and so she had him at home, and he was recovering, and then his esophagus burst, and so Jim said it was the weirdest thing because he was out asleep. He said he was in a hotel room. He was shooting a movie. He was in a hotel room, and he said all of a sudden he said this super peaceful feeling came over him, just like absolute peace. And if you knew my husband, he was, he was always worried, anxiety actor, just always worried. And he said he just got this really peaceful feeling when he woke out of a deep sleep. And he said within 10 seconds the phone rang, and it was his mother, and Dan had passed. And he said he just felt like Dan had come to say, I'm at peace.
Yeah, and this is a story I think that in different iterations we hear all the time with people that are really highly connected to one another. I want to switch gears to you because you were the one who were like, I'm really interested in the paranormal. So tell me, did you have any experiences early on in life that led you down the path of becoming more and more interested?
Well, I was born a twin, and my twin died at 33 hours. And my mom, who's was this wonderful, vivacious, crazy little Korean lady, was very opinionated. She was very superstitious, and she would want me to understand that my sister was always with me, and my sister would give me good reasoning and the right path and things. If she'd be there, she's my guardian angel, so to speak. And so I always felt like I was in tune with that. And so from a paranormal sense, I always felt like my sister was with me. And but it wasn't until I was 13, and I don't know if I would count this as a paranormal experience. I do, because I think it was probably my sister that gave me this intuition. I would go to New Jersey every year with my grandmother to visit relatives, and I had a second cousin who had married a widower with 5 children, then they had 2 more, and they would always live in some big rambling old Victorian,
as you'd need with 7 children.
Yes. And and I never understood why in the Northeast they have basements but no tornadoes, and in Texas we have tornadoes and no basements, but there were always there were always creepy basements involved. But anyway, they moved, and they would move, I was only there once a year for the whole summer, and sometimes I'd come and they'd move to another house, and I was never afraid. I'd spend a week with them and go back to my aunt's, but one year the house that they had moved into, again, not anything different than what they had ever lived in before, but that house just creeped me out. And there was Debbie, Donna, Diana, Denise, Darlene, Jerry, and Bonnie. And the 3 oldest girls lived, their room was the entire attic. My cousin's husband had built that out for them. And it was just like the Teen Queen Palace.
Sure.
It was so big. But the only way you could get up there was through a very narrow staircase inside of a closet in a second-floor bedroom.
Kind of hard to get the furniture up there, huh?
Yes. And but I never wanted to spend the night, and I never did. And that was the summer that they had moved in. Now, one of my cousins, whose name I shall not mention, but she was always in trouble. She was the one that was always, sneaking out and, not being squeaky clean. And but that fall, she had snuck out, and she was sneaking back in. And when she snuck into the house, there was smoke coming up from the basement. And she woke everybody up, and they all got out, and that house went up like,
oh my goodness,
boom.
Yeah.
They lost everything within minutes. It was just consumed. And I thought about those girls up there in that attic room, and how the only way out was that, and so for me, what that taught me, or what that said to me, and how that started me sort of on the path was, I got to listen to the voices in my head, in my heart, my intuition, to follow, to be aware and use my instincts, etc. And so, that's that kind of, and I've always loved ghost stories and mysteries and things like that,
So it's something you've always been attracted to.
Oh yeah.
But now you've then entered the world of the paranormal, and you now are a paranormal investigator. Is that right?
I have been, yes, on investigations. I haven't been on a lot. I'm leading one tonight.
Okay, and where are you going tonight?
The Brickyard Restaurant.
Okay.
And so I'm excited about that. There was an investigation last night here at the Belmont Inn, and I had never used a FLIR thermal imager and got something.
I do want to hear all about it because I've heard nothing about. I heard the investigation happening.
Yes.
While I was trying to sleep, but I didn't actually hear the outcomes of the investigation. So I'd love to hear about your experience.
Well, we broke up into teams, so I can only speak to my team. But we were in the big dining room there, and the rest of the first floor area here, and that was everybody else. The other teams had broken up, and they were in other parts of the inn, and we. For the first 40 minutes, I mean, it's basically nothing, you know. We were separated, but in the same area. And they had the cat balls on a couple of tables in the main dining room. And two of the investigators were in the main dining room at the time, and I was out kind of in the rotunda area here, and I don't know where our lead investigator was, but all of a sudden I heard them say the cat balls are going off. And so I walked in there, and I had the thermal imager and the an EMF meter, and we began to try to converse with whatever was there, and it just wouldn't respond accordingly. So came in, and about that time our lead investigator came through those doors, and I mean whammo, that cat ball lit up. So he decided that he would take the reins in trying to communicate, because you know, sometimes a spirit will, you know, attach to someone because they're more comfortable with that person or whatever than they would, you know, somebody else. So obviously it wasn't answering any of our questions, but he was, you know, it was responding to him. So I had the thermal imager, and I'd been, you know, throughout the investigation, I'd been, you know, going around the different rooms. I wasn't catching anything, nothing, zero. And so while Emilio, our lead investigator, was conversing with this spirit, I had the thermal imager, and I was slowly, you know, pointing it in the area, and all of a sudden, and I'll show you the picture, to me, it looked like a full body apparition that was trying to manifest, because the apparition itself, you could not see with the naked eye, you could see it in the imager. It wasn't stationary. It was it wasn't, when I say it was moving, it wasn't moving around the room. It was like it was vibrating. It was like it was shaking a little bit, trying to form is the best way I can describe it. And so I took a picture of it with the imager, and then called the other investigators over and said, y'all come look at this. And they did. And so Emilio, our lead investigator, went back to where he was. He had the dowsing rods, and he began to continue the conversation. And I continued to, you know, wave the imager around the room. Never got another image of anything. And then just a few minutes later, everybody was finished with their investigations, came back in. But and then I went up and went to bed, and I didn't. So I didn't
and
know what happened.
You went right to bed after that, huh?
I went right to bed because
that was it. You just went
I'm
right
not
to sleep.
afraid. But
well, and I'm a believer, and my husband knows this about me. And there is going to be another segment of an episode where I actually talk about some of the experiences I had as an adolescent. But one of the components of my belief is that spirits, energies, you know, things of that nature, there isn't necessarily malintent behind that presence. And so did you, in that moment, get any sense of, you know, did you feel threatened? Did you feel like, no, this is just an energy source that is here. It's not here to harm us in any way. Because, you know, if you have an experience like that and you feel that this person or energy is just present, you might be able to just go right back to sleep, right? Go upstairs, fall asleep, no issue.
And no, I did not get, and again, back to following my intuition, my instincts. I think that I trust myself that would have kicked in had what we had experienced at that time been something that was threatening or malevolent.
Right.
And I did not feel that at all. What we were getting from the conversation was that it was a male, former owner, over 40.
Okay. That's a lot of information to get from that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And so, but no, I didn't, again, following that, what I feel like is my intuition about people and places and things, not at all. I wasn't fearful at all.
You felt safe.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a big takeaway from a situation like that. And I in my former situations, I was much younger, and at first was fearful just because unknown, but then quickly came to that same place of feeling, you know what, this is actually safe. This isn't threatening. I can go to sleep. Nothing bad's going to happen to me. And so how was your night sleeping at the Belmont Inn?
Great. I mean, again, when I checked in, I asked the desk clerk, I said, well, is, room 21 haunted? And he said, oh, very. We had a man run out of the hotel in his underwear, and so, but what I do when I stay in a place that's known to be haunted, who knows? I mean, it's daytime right now, and in my opinion, there are spirits. If there are spirits here, they're wandering around right now.
Sure.
What's
Hopefully
the rule?
they're listening to the
Right.
pod.
What's the rule that they only come out at night?
Right.
And no.
That's just when we're quiet enough to really sense a lot of the things going on around us.
And there's no distractions. Our animal instincts, I think, come out, and our senses are more heightened to things.
I think especially in that moment right before sleep really overtakes you, where you're kind of in that peri consciousness, right? That in between time where you're still conscious enough to know what's going on, and I'm not actually asleep yet. That tends to be like a really good sweet spot for those energies to come across. Yeah.
But so you go up there with some anticipation, right? But what I do when I enter a building or a room that someone has said, well, we have activity here, is I always introduce myself, and I always say, I'm just here for a visit. I'm not threatening in any way. I want to enjoy my stay. Because sometimes, particularly, you're not on an investigation, but you're staying in a hotel or a B&B or something that is known to be haunted. I just want whatever energy or spirits that might be there to not think that I'm there in any way to cause harm or trouble or to mock them or anything like that. And so just like I would if I when I met you, hi, I'm Mary Deese Hampton, and I'm here to visit and have a good time.
I like that lens that you're putting on it of kind of having the reverse be true, that we have our lens of how we might perceive an energy or a spirit to be, but they have the same, right? Their perception may also interact with what happens in the space, and making sure that our presence is not threatening in that space is just as important as the
right.
reverse.
And you think about a place like this where there are hundreds of people that come in and out of here. I mean, this is their this is their home, their area, and they're interested. I would think, So I tend to do that.
Maybe sometimes annoyed. Maybe sometimes overwhelmed. There could be invading their space.
Correct. So I that's something that I tend to do, and I have not had any experience up there, but I've certainly not had a bad experience.
Yep, that's right.
So
that's great. I love it. And so, what are you doing tonight?
Tonight, I'm first and foremost eating pizza.
No, where are you eating pizza?
Well, we're going to at the place we're investigating. So it's a restaurant. So we're going to
plug them.
The Brickyard restaurant.
Brickyard?
Yes, and it is just a few blocks from the Belmont Inn here in Abbeville, South Carolina. And so we're going to have pizza at 9:30 and just kind of mix with the participants of the investigation and talk a little bit. And we couldn't get started on that venue until 11 because it is an active restaurant. So we have to wait for them to close.
On a Saturday night.
Yes, yes. And so how kind of them, though, to let us come in. So we're doing the investigation starting at 11, and I am a co-investigator. So
okay.
The pressure's on.
The pressure is on, and I want to hear tomorrow what you find. And I'm not going to tell you, no spoilers, but my husband and I did walk by the Brickyard last night, and I had an interesting experience, a small interesting experience, which I will not share with you until tomorrow.
Oh, no, tell me now.
Because I cannot bias your perception of this place going in. So I'll chat to you about it in the morning over some coffee.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
And we'll see what you find out. So I will be hunting you down tomorrow morning to find out how it went. Okay. Outside of the paranormal world, you are an actor.
I am.
Okay. Can we hear a little bit about what are some of your former projects and your current projects that you're working on now?
Yes. In fact, you can go to, Google it or go to YouTube, but my most recent project is a Netflix sitcom that is going to debut all episodes on November 3rd called Blockbuster. And it stars Randall Park, who everybody will know from Fresh Off the Boat, and a wonderful rom-com called Always Be My Maybe. And with Ali Wong, and
loved Always Be My Maybe.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Loved.
And if you saw that, that's who he is. He's just the sweetest guy, goofy, sweet. Love him to pieces. But that was shot up in Vancouver, and the episode I'm in it was episode number 6, but it's my understanding that Netflix is dropping all episodes on November 3rd, so you can binge watch it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Charlie and I will be binging.
Yes.
So.
Okay. So I'm excited about that. I also worked on the last season of Claws on TNT with Niecy Nash. The people were great. It was really a different experience because it was shot during the pandemic, prior to vaccination.
Oh gosh.
And so I've been an actor since the late 80s, and just the difference in how all that worked was weird. But I played a competing manicurist who ended up being a Korean gangster lady. So that was fun.
I feel like that's very much your vibe.
Oh, I tell you, just, I'm meaner than a snake. But anyway, so I've got you fooled. But, and then, I've done Wisdom of the Crowd, another Netflix show called Lady. Netflix apparently likes me a lot.
There are worse streaming services to have on your side.
But a show called Lady Dynamite, which was on for a couple of years, and then a show that's on Amazon Prime called Vindication. I'm in the second season of that, second episode. It's like a faith-based kind of detective show, not in your face faith-based, but there's like a lesson,
an undercurrent.
Yes, it's a very well written, very, very good show. And back in the 90s, I did several episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters. I was on General Hospital for a couple of years. Did a lot of commercial work, and I've been lucky. I've got a movie coming out.
No, hold on.
What?
It takes a lot more than luck to do all the things you just listed. I'm sure there's quite a lot of talent along with that luck. But okay, well, you say you've been lucky.
Yes, I just also there's a short subject film that I star in called Insure, and it's based on a true story about two elderly women. Although they really listen, I'm just telling you, they had to use a lot of makeup, right?
I wouldn't buy you as an elderly woman any day, but okay.
You will in this because they did a good job. But two elderly women, based on true story, in California, who murdered homeless men on Skid Row after they took insurance policies out on them, and so that was a stretch for me, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds
actually.
fun. Yeah.
Because a lot of my background is comedy, and so it's not a comedy. There's some funny moments in it, but I'm excited about that. That'll go to Sundance. That will go to a lot of film festivals. And then what happens a lot of times is the short subjects that go to the film festivals will then get funding to do features. Based on that. And so that was a lot of fun to do. And So that's some of my most recent work. I go back and forth to LA. The auditions have really picked up, but they're totally different. The industry is just, with the onset of the pandemic, everything was on tape.
Right.
And that, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you have the ability to audition anywhere in the world. You just hit that button and zing, there it goes to the casting director.
Right.
But the disadvantage, I guess, from an actor's standpoint, the disadvantage is, there's so much worry about, everybody has to sign an NDA, and you don't want the storyline to get out. So they'll send you could have 5 scenes, and they'll send you 2 pages of dialogue. And if you don't know what the story is, obviously, if you're playing a judge or a doctor and you're delivering the bad news or the sentence or whatever, you get it, you get your character. But if it's a situation where you have a scene with another woman who is your friend, right? And you have this dialogue and you don't know, well, what is my relationship? How long have I known
hard
that?
to flesh out your character.
Right. And when you're in the room, you have the opportunity to ask that casting director, so what's the story?
Right.
Or you can come in and you can, you have your choice of how you're going to do it based on your perception of what the scene is. And if it's not right, the casting director has the opportunity to say to you, that was great, but could you do it with a little bit more humor? Or could you do it with a little darker tone? When you're doing stuff on tape and you don't have the information you need, it is just a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
And if you're wrong,
it doesn't work.
It's like, next.
A lot of the nuances get lost. And I think that is true of a lot of the world that we're now navigating, the post-COVID world. And to be honest with you, this is the first time that I, since the beginning of COVID, have really been at an event like this. And it's been 2.5, a little over 2.5 years.
Unbelievable.
So lots of newness to navigate. But I'm glad that you continue to be successful in this other part of your career.
Thank you.
Mary, if people want to find you and learn more about you, find you, be able to follow you on social media, where are the best places for them to find you?
You can look on IMBD. You can see my demo reel. My agency, I've got my agency information on there. You can find me on Facebook under Mary Deese Hampton. Reach out to me there.
Okay.
And I love talking about myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, I love, this is fun for me to talk about these types of shows. I like to meet new people. I was trepidatious a little bit when friends were telling me, go on back to the cons that you went to, and the fans love Jimmy, and they'll love to have an opportunity to buy his signed photos and his book, his autobiography, which got published. And I was trepidatious about that because I thought, am I going to go and just sit there and cry like a baby? And the opposite is so true. It just warms my heart. I hear stories about him from other celebrities, that are at these events that I never heard before. Fans will relay stories about an encounter with Jim that they had at a show, or and it's all positive and it's all good, and I love it. Come out and see me wherever I am and tell me, how you felt about, watching Teen Wolf for the first time, or watching F Troop with your dad, or whatever it is. And I love to hear it. So these are great opportunities for me to meet fans and to share stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me, Mary. It was really great to learn more about you.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, I'm going to end it there.
Our second of the 3 guests for this Arcane Carolinas Case Files episode is Bishop James Long. Before we get to that segment, Charlie and I thought it was worth noting that we've said pretty consistently that we don't really go for demon possession stories or exorcism stories, that kind of general topic. Bishop Long, however, maintains a practical, grounded outlook and seeks to help people identify and address mental health concerns first and foremost. And we like that a lot. So, on to Bishop Long's interview. And again, thanks for listening.
All right, so we are here with another Arcane Carolinas Case Files segment at the Upstate Spirits Conference in Abbeville, South Carolina, with Bishop James Long.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's good. Hopefully you're doing well.
I am. We met last night over dinner and had a really great conversation about the nature of some paranormal topics and what that looks like from different perspectives. And I just wanted to introduce you to our audience a little bit.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So, you want a little bit of history?
Yeah. Tell us about yourself.
I knew I wanted to be a priest when I was 5. And I began studying books on demonology when I was 9. And I didn't quite understand why. I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. It was very, very important for me to focus on the opposite of God. Mm-hmm. So I of course, continued. I grew up Roman Catholic, was an altar boy, and did everything I was supposed to do, private schools and all that stuff. But before I went into the seminary, I really had a calling to go to the seminary, but I really wanted to learn a little bit about life, about how to, budget and expend, So I lived the life a little bit, and it just I had a great career, but I decided it was time to give it up. So I went to the seminary, and I studied for the Roman Catholic priesthood for 6 years, studied with the Benedictines and the Jesuits. I studied a great deal of demonology at that time. The archdiocese at that time, I even talked to the archbishop, and he knew that I had a calling to serve as an exorcist. So this was going to be something that I was going to do after ordination. But oddly enough, in graduate school, I started feeling God pulling me towards the old Catholic Church. I had my life all planned. I was going to be a Roman Catholic priest. I was going to have a parish. Life was going to be good. Mm-hmm. And then God said, hey, look, I want you to look over here.
Could you, for our listeners that might not be familiar with that, could you explain what that is?
Yeah, the old Catholics branched from the Roman Catholic, and the church in Utrecht was given complete autonomy by Pope Leo XIII because the Pope couldn't go back and forth and ordaining and consecrating. So the church in Netherlands in Utrecht was given complete autonomy. Mm-hmm. Well, and everything was fine until the church in Netherlands became very wealthy. And I guess the Roman church decided, hey, look, we want your property and money now. And so the church in Utrecht said, no. We have autonomy. You can't do this. And so the church then said, well, you're heretics. And
Tale as old as time.
There we go. And then they introduced infallibility.
Right.
Papal infallibility, and that's when the church in Jesus said, that's enough. That's enough. And so there was a split. So we belong to that schism, if you can. Now, of course, in the Roman Church, they say that any church that has valid apostolic succession is considered validly Catholic. Apostolic succession is Peter laid hands upon this disciple and that, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can show your apostolic lines to Peter, the Roman Church says you're validly Catholic. So I have a 121-page document that shows my apostolic lines to Peter. So I'm with the United States Old Catholic Church, and I serve as the exorcist for the church. And as of today, I perform 30 documented exorcisms. Mm-hmm. And 20 years ago, I didn't want to go public with my ministry. I wanted to stay private.
Sure. But there's a lot of weight that comes with it.
It is. It's a tremendous amount, more so than I thought.
And I think it's important for our listeners. So our listeners have heard me say, and Michael, who's not present, but I'll speak for him on this. And we talked about this a little bit last night. There is a lot of misrepresentation and the potential for abuse that comes with this field, specifically against vulnerable individuals.
Sure.
So this is a topic that we, to this date, have very publicly said, we're not going to talk about it. And we're primarily a history podcast, and we kind of work around these types of topics. So, in speaking to you, I'm signaling right now to anyone that hears this that I appreciate your lens on this, and that you and I have already had that conversation. And I appreciate your take on the weight of it. So, anyway, sorry to cut you off.
No, it's a heavyweight, but. 20 years ago, there was no clergy helping the paranormal community. There was actually one. There was Father Andrew Calder, who was an Episcopalian, and he was not called to serve as an exorcist. Mm-hmm. And so there was no clergy. And I went public because I had friends in the paranormal, and they said, James, we have no one out there helping. Right. So I went public with the ministry, and that's when it was crazy. That's when Ghost Adventures and History Channel and Travel and A&E and all these networks were contacting me. I was like, what is this about? And I didn't understand it. To me, because I've been studying this since I was 9. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand I wasn't, I guess, prepared for the overwhelming response from even television shows, because that was new 20 years ago.
Yes.
And then when Ghost Adventures contacted me and said, look, we want you to do Bobby Mackey's with us, and this is what we want, et cetera. Okay, that's what I do. And the thing is, I've never charged for the ministry, never will. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy to do that, but that's the way. And within Old Catholic Church, we're not salaried. Mm-hmm. So we're not giving a stipend or church or retirement. This is a ministry of love. We pay for it out of our own pocket. And I've been doing it for 20 years.
Has there ever been an instance where you felt that someone was approaching you, going back to what I was talking about a little bit, from a cynical perspective, mm-hmm. and you had to be like, hey, this isn't really what you're dealing with?
Well, sure. As a matter of fact, as soon as I did Ghost Adventures with Bobby Mackey's, there was someone who called me and they wanted me to travel, and they were telling me everything was going on in their home. So all right, fine. So I packed up all the stuff in the car, drove 11 hours to their location. And when I showed up, there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing occurring. And then I talked to them. I don't understand. You're telling me things are flying across the room and electrical appliances are exploding. I'm doing a blessing and nothing is happening. Well, I just wanted to talk to you about Ghost Adventures. Was Bobby Mackey's real?
So the cynicism, yeah.
Really,
sure, I can
11
imagine.
Hours. Yeah, that was frustrating.
Sure, I can absolutely imagine that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, I'm trying to think of the phrasing here, but I see it a lot when we get emails and people contact us. It's flashy, right? To a degree. That it shouldn't be the talk of demonology and all that. And again, I want to drive home that I appreciate your lens on it as being grounded and practical and respectful of the reality of the situation that somebody might be in. Again, just because we've never talked about this on our show. So this is literally the first time that I'm talking about this on the show. So I appreciate that we're having this conversation with you about it and the lens that you bring to it, and the fact that you do operate with discernment when it comes to those situations. Obviously, this is a very dark topic or heavy topic, however you want to describe it. Can you describe any, maybe not necessarily in dealing with exorcisms or demonology, but any lighter moments or moments of joy? Like, I feel like bringing your perspective to the paranormal investigator community is, for me, that's one of those moments where it's like, this is a great thing.
Yeah, first of all, I love the paranormal, but I've always been fascinated, I think, with the supernatural and the paranormal. But also, I'm a prankster. You have to be when the cases are serious. Because as of today, I performed 30 actual documented exorcisms on people who are validly possessed. Now, when I say documented, I work with people who are psychiatrists. Mm-hmm. We require psychological evaluation. I won't speak to you unless you have a psychological evaluation. So if you claim to be possessed, that's one of the things I've been teaching about for 20 years now. You cannot perform an exorcism on someone with dissociative identity disorder, which is multiple personality. If you do, you can create another personality, another identity, or if they're paranoid schizophrenic. So it's very, very dangerous to feed into a psychosis if someone thinks that they're possessed, but in fact it's psychological. So the problem is there's so many people playing exorcists,
right,
and not being pastoral and caring for the person.
Right.
So there are very serious sides. You will get a stoic Bishop Long when it comes to the serious stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, I also like to pull pranks.
Right.
So, and I
think
do.
It's important to know. It's like you're a person just like anybody else with a sense of humor and feelings and all that.
I do. I absolutely. I have a friend. She's a dear friend of mine. She's 67 years old. I love her to death. She's I consider her my family. I've known her for 25 years. She has multiple sclerosis. She is afraid of a shadow of a fly. I mean, literally, she is on pins and needles. So she saw a little flashlight and outside of her house, and she was terrified. She was, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. Well, I put a little speaker outside I am probably going to have to do a lot of penance for this, but I put a little speaker outside of a window, and I put my little phone on, and I pushed play, and all of a sudden she heard the theme of Michael Myers. And she was absolutely convinced that Michael Myers was going to come get her. I mean, she was going to, but you have to have fun with this. You have to enjoy it. You got to have, I don't know, it just, people are just, you can't be, everything has to be demons.
Yeah, I think that's unhealthy.
It's very unhealthy, and that's not, look, as I said, 30 exorcisms in 20 years. Now, let me just show you something, because I know your audience can't see this, but you can. That's the emails in 2 days.
That's a lot of emails, man.
Now,
that's too many emails.
7,000 over 7,000 in 2 days.
Yeah.
And this is
How do you keep up with that?
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. And then on TikTok, I have over 12,000 messages.
Right.
And there are people on these messages saying, I'm possessed, I have a demon in my house. Well, what I'm trying to say, for 20 years, I have performed 30 exorcisms on individuals who were validly possessed.
Right. Let's do the math on that.
It's very rare.
0.00 whatever percent.
I'm naturally blonde, and I'm not a mathematician, so you don't want me to worry. Me working on your books or your bank account would really get you in trouble. That's why I work with an accountant.
Right.
But no, seriously, it really is rare. It does occur.
Sure.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing. Look, I have a doctorate in ministry. I have a master's of divinity, a master's of education, and a master's of business. I went to Loyola University in Chicago, and that's where I graduated from undergraduate. Mm-hmm. I studied with the Benedictines and Jesuits. I don't charge. I've never charged.
Right.
And the reason is I tell people this, if I did not know that possession existed, I'd be doing something else with my time.
Well, sure. It comes down to that, like, minuscule percentage of cases, right? And I'm trying to think of the right word, sensationalized maybe, but that whole, like, everything's demons approach has pervaded popular culture.
It's frustrating. It really is, because here's what I get frustrated with. You have a lot of paranormal teams, and I work with paranormal teams.
Sure.
But you have a lot of people who go on social media and they watch a video, and now all of a sudden they're demonologists.
Right.
And even worse is they're going into people's homes and then saying you have a demon in your home and scaring the heck out of the people, and then they're walking away, giving no resolution, and now the homeowners are thinking, now what do? I have a demon in my home that wants to kill my children. This infuriates me.
Yeah, it creates a lot of problems.
Sure it does. It's why would you do that to somebody? Just so that you can get likes on social media. And then you have people who are claiming to be demonologists who are performing rites that are strictly reserved for an ordained clergy who is trained. A demonologist has no business performing the solemn rite of exorcism. They have no business.
Right.
But that's what's happening.
And it's unfortunate, and it is dangerous.
Sure it is.
And it is heavy, and like to your point earlier about it can create more problems.
No doubt about it. No doubt.
So I really appreciate your lens on that. The pastoral approach and caring for the individual, I think, is paramount. It's one of the reasons why when people ask us, oh, can you... We have actually gotten, what do you think this is? Mm-hmm. Or what do you think that is? It's like, man, we're borderline historians. Like, we're not even paranormal investigators. Do I go to a spot where a legend is based just to check it out from a historical perspective? Sure, but I'm not a paranormal investigator. And I think that if more people, or rather not more, I'm trying not to be judgmental, if the folks that are proclaiming themselves to be demonologists that are not, or rather proclaiming themselves to be exorcists or demonologists that are just interested in the paranormal could take a step back from themselves and see, like, oh, this really has the potential to damage.
Sure.
I think that would be great. So I appreciate that you are in this space working with actual paranormal investigators to provide that insight and education and just that guidance of like, hey, maybe we get a psychological evaluation going.
It's non-negotiable. And the thing is, I have to, because 20 years ago when I was starting this, I was doing it by myself, and it was terrible. It was too much. I could not be in all the states. I just couldn't do it. And so I created a network where I would find teams that are reputable, mm-hmm. that are experienced. Everything is not a demon. Right. And they would go in and try to debunk. That is the goal. We go into homes to debunk. That is absolute, essentially. Now, if we can't do that, then we start looking into the spiritual aspects.
Yep.
But debunking is priority one.
Yep.
Being pastoral is always priority over anything.
And that's what we talked about last night a little bit, where I was like, you know what? Let's look at this from a historical perspective, from a scientific perspective. Let's see what we can rule out. And then if we can't explain something, we go, hey, that's the unexplained.
That's right. And the problem is, like I said, what really irritates me is I'm thinking, look, I've taken a volunteer vow of celibacy. In the church community that I belong to, we are not required to be celibate. But I have taken a vow of celibacy as a Benedictine as well because, number one, I don't want to bring a family into this ministry. Mm-hmm. It's too dangerous. It's just too dangerous. So, but I also get very, very angry when I hear teams going into single moms who have little babies and who are already afraid because legitimate activity may be occurring in their home that may not be demonic, and then teams immediately scaring them, and you have a demon in your home, and now they're freaking out. They're a single mom. They're trying to protect their children. They have no idea what's going on, and then the team leaves and causes activity to increase tenfold.
Right.
And that I am finding that to be an epidemic in the paranormal. It truly is becoming a problem. Yeah. And I don't know what the solution is except for continuing to educate people. Stop using the word demon. Just remove that from the vocabulary, because even if you think it might be, don't even imply that it could, because what is going to happen when you use that word and then your team leaves for the night? And then you have the homeowners who are there at night with now looking at you, the paranormal team, as the professionals. And now they're thinking, because someone used the demon word, now what are we going to do? Now this team who are the professionals, they're gone. But we're left here dealing with this. And it just, I just wish that more teams would stop using the demonic as an excuse to sensationalize so they can get social media likes.
So they can sell.
It's what it is.
It's selling. So obviously I've already said that I appreciate your lens. How can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you? How should people, what is your preferred, I know you're on TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm not, so I don't know how to follow people on TikTok. Yeah, so please tell people how to follow you.
Well, they can follow me on TikTok, but please don't send me a message because I have too many messages. I just can't. It's Bishop James Long, all one word. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who've created fake profiles.
Sure.
And that happens. It's Bishop James Long, all one word. If any other profile with my picture, it's wrong. Don't follow it. Because what they're doing is they're creating these fake profiles, and they're contacting people and asking for money for donations for someplace in Africa.
Sure.
So, and it's really a problem. So that I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Bishop James Long, or just to the website, bishopjameslong.com.
There you go.
Simple, easy peasy.
That is easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
I really appreciate you being willing to share with our listeners.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
And finally, our third guest for this episode is Rick Hayes. Rick describes himself as a psychic medium and has been featured in shows on Sci-Fi, the Travel Channel, CBS, Chiller, Destination America, and lots of other places. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
We are live at the Abbeville Upstate Spirit Conference in Abbeville, South Carolina. This is an Arcane Carolinas Case Files episode featuring Rick Hayes, psychic medium and life coach.
But pleasure to be here this morning. I had my coffee, and I think I can share a few things with you this morning. I think I'm awake.
Well, I'm there, and I'll vouch for you. I'm pretty sure you're there.
Good.
So, Rick, we're sitting next to each other. We're in the what they call the wine room.
Appropriately for me, that's good.
And we'll be recording an episode of Arcane Carolinas that you'll be unwittingly subjected to as we're sitting right next to each other.
Pleasure to be here this morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you this morning.
So if you could introduce yourself to our listeners, that'd be a good place to start.
Well, again, my name is Rick Hayes, and they define me as a psychic medium. I have many titles. I've psychic medium and author. I've authored books. I'm a life coach, a speaker. I just tell everybody I've got many titles, but just call me to dinner. That's what. I've been in the industry now, out in the public, for a little over 20 years.
Okay.
And I was born with these abilities, but growing up in the community, in the area that I grew up in, I just kept it to myself because I didn't want everybody to think I was weird.
Sure. Yeah. It's one of those things that you see this in a lot of families where maybe stories don't come out about what people experience until much later in their life because they're afraid.
Exactly. And I was raised in a religious church-going upbringing.
Sure.
My mom's a preacher's daughter, and most of my grandfather was a very highly respected evangelist minister, and so with that and a combination of other things, I wasn't friends when I was growing up, so I didn't want to tell them someone standing by them they couldn't see them. So,
right.
So I was pretty well kept it to myself and went to college at Go Gators, by the way. And about 22 years ago, I had a friend shared with me. I actually shared a message with her, and she shared with me I was being selfish because I was given something that I could be serving and helping others. And so for the last 20 years, it's been my path and my purpose, and it's been a phenomenal life. I travel all over the country and speak in different venues, and have done television work with different networks, just enjoying life.
Yeah, I will vouch that as I was setting up this morning, I got to, I wasn't eavesdropping, but I did overhear a little bit about the way that you interact with people, and I appreciated the approach that you took in your interactions with people that are seeking help, for lack of a better term, right? They're coming to you for help, in the way that you deliver that and carry the conversation was very respectful and empathetic, and I appreciated that approach that you took.
I thank you for that. That's just who I am. I feel like if we respect one another, we get more out of life. And
I agree.
And so and whenever someone comes up to me and I feel like a presence of a loved one is around them, I call or those in spirit loved ones. Mm-hmm. And if they're giving me something to tell them, then I feel like it's my service to give to them the messages I receive. So, and I try to do it. I'm a positive person. I'm known in this industry as one, if you're going to be around Rick, you got to be positive, because I teach that. I get up in the morning, I speak, act, and think positive, because I feel like when you do, you receive positive in your day. Mm-hmm. And so any messages I receive, I try to give them in a positive way, where it gives some fulfillment to those individuals that I'm talking with. So
sure, and I think your podcast tagline is the podcast to inspire.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that carries over into that program as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. I actually I didn't know anything about podcasts a few years ago, and and I was sharing with you earlier, someone came to me and I got into life coaching about 6-7 years ago, and I learned from the very best. His name is Tony Robbins. He's just a great person, and I learned from him. And when I started doing the life coaching, I had someone approach me and says, "Where's your podcast?" And it's like, "What's a podcast?" So I started my podcast, and the podcast is the focus on that is to bring your daily life in a positive direction and give you some thoughts on maybe some tools that can help you in your life as well. So I'm enjoying it. As I shared with you, I don't get the chance to sit down and actually do a podcast as many as I would like to, but the other side of the coin is on podcasts is I love being on them as well. So I'm having fun here this morning.
Awesome. Yeah, this is Arcane Carolinas Case Files episodes are episodes where we try to highlight individuals that operate in the Venn diagram of different areas of interest where there's some overlap for our listeners. So I think that people really get a kick out of learning about you and checking out your podcast and your services. You mentioned, what is a podcast? If you've never listened to Arcane Carolinas, this is my spin on it. I usually find a way to go off the rails, and I just did. So I don't know if you did this as a child, but I definitely did this as a little guy, where I had this Fisher-Price tape deck, and I would record fake radio commercials or whatever. And I feel like that is like proto-podcasting, right? Because you're making your own little radio show, and then here we are so many decades later sitting here going, well, now anybody can do it. And you can share those self-produced shows with people. And I think that's part of what makes it so fun to do a podcast.
It's funny you should mention that because it brought back a memory of mine maybe I was in podcasts as a kid because me and my buddy of mine who was my next door neighbor, we decided to take the old walkie-talkies. You remember those? Mm-hmm. You had to push the button.
Yep.
And we put tape over the button, and we actually took a wire and hooked it onto the antenna of the walkie-talkie and took a hanger and went outside the window and hung it on a tree. Mm-hmm. And we were doing like a radio show.
Yep. So yeah,
you did the same thing,
right? And I'm pretty sure that's where why it clicks for people, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's an almost universal thing. Even as the technology changes, you'll see kids now making little YouTube videos, and they're making their own show, and the technology might evolve, but that desire to connect with other people and share what's important to you at that time, I think that's a universal thing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
we didn't know we were starting podcasts back then, did we?
Right. I had whoa. Oh, look at that. Sorry about that interruption. I had my phone on silent all morning until I realized I was missing some messages. So of course I turned the ringer on, and now I'm getting calls while we're trying to record. I apologize about that.
That's all right. Actually, that's my brother's ringtone. Was that him on the phone? So
it used to be something else. And a fellow I worked with, shout out to Dave. I doubt you'll hear this, but if you do, and he said that the ringtone that I had did not reflect my personality at all. And I said, well, what should it be? He was like, you should be the quacking duck. And I was just like, I don't know whether to be insulted or laugh, but I'm going to change it to that. And I did. But yeah, right. So I think there's this sensation of wanting to share, for some people, at least for me, and you obviously shared, of wanting to share messages that are important to you, or ideas that are important to you, or that you just enjoy. And I think that that's part of where the joy of podcasting, not to be too cheesy, but I think that's where it comes from, right?
Right, and that's what we talked about earlier. We was talking about others' different beliefs and different thoughts of life, and and I shared with you earlier that I look at it this way: if we all believed the same way and thought the same way, we'd never learn in life, because that's what's so great about having individual beliefs and individual thoughts, because we can learn from one another. And podcast has been a great tool to do so. Yeah. And so, so it's, when I share my thoughts and beliefs, I'm going to be speaking at 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to be talking about some things in this industry that I know that I've never been one of those that went along with everyone else. I've always just followed my own beat on my own drums, and I always like to share. When I was in 4th grade, I was wearing, this was long ago, okay? Long ago. But I was wearing the Nehru jackets and the medallions and the scarves, back in the Beatle days.
Yeah, sure.
And, and I was bullied because I was different, but that's who I was. And still to this day, I follow what I feel. I enjoy sharing what I feel beliefs are. Some of the things I'm talking about this afternoon is in this industry, for example, one wonders, there's a theory about portals that those in the next part of life actually have to go through a door to get here on the other side, to get on our side. It's like, so you're telling me that those on the other side are going around everywhere and saying, now where's that door at? Where I can't get in because I got to find that door. I don't believe there's portals, and that's a belief of mine. And so, and then another is that I'm going to talk about today is about marriage. Are we married in the next part of life? And I got to tell you this real quick because
careful, my wife's sitting right over there.
Well, first of all, I'll never forget. I just started doing private sessions. I call them sessions, and I had a group of a family about 12, 14, and one lady walked in. She got there late, and we was in the question part at the very end. And one of the ladies came in and she sat down and she said, I said, is there any other questions? She said, I've got a question. I said, all right. And she said, are we married in the next part of life? And before I had a chance to finish, she looked at me and she said, because I've been married 5 times and I don't want to be with any of them. So what I shared with her is we're not married like here, like
sure.
on paper. traditional, but we have the experience of the marriage, and we have the love that we created during that marriage. And so that's how marriage, in my beliefs, is in the next part of life. But that's another belief that, that others would say, Rick, no, you're not quite right. That's great.
So I think that there's, I'm really glad that we're getting into the weeds a little bit here. I think that would, the theory that you just proposed would explain why individuals will sometimes report being visited by a spouse that has passed on or something like that, because that connection would remain. And I like that much better than the way it says, I don't want to see any of them, which is funny. I mean, that's clever. That's funny.
Well, when she told me she was married 5 times, didn't want to see any of them, I thought, all right, are you like the Black Widow or what? What's going on here,
If I wake up in the morning and meet one person I think was a jerk and then don't see any more jerks for the rest of the day, I met a jerk. If I wake up and everyone I meet is a jerk, chances are I'm probably doing something wrong with the way I interact with people. Not to judge that person too harshly.
But again, the thing about it is, especially when it comes to marriage and relationships here, it is a part of this life. It is part for us to evolve and grow and learn, and relationships are very, very important in life, whether it's one time or whether it's 5 times. Each one, for me personally, I've experienced 2 marriages in my life. I never look at them as a failure, because it was a time of learning to better me, to grow. So to me, that's what relationships are all about, is partnership and learning and growing together.
I would even take it a step further and say that even beyond, we're talking about partnerships and romantic relationships. I would say that your relationships with other people, even collegial or platonic or whatever, those are very important in the way that you build bridges to other people and with other people. With other people is a better way to put that, right? And I think that those are important as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that you get more out of life by building those relationships, the old no one's an island kind of thing.
Right.
It enriches your life to create those positive connections. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Good.
I'm with you on that. But yeah, this has been an Arcane Carolinas Case Files profile of Rick Hayes, psychic medium life coach. You can check him out at lifesgift.com. Is it okay if I read the phone number?
Absolutely.
His office number is 812-559-0011, and he is on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, all the places you
everywhere.
Get your podcasts. It is, what's the name of the podcast again?
The name of the podcast is Believe with Rick Hayes. It is a life coaching directions podcast, and you can find it everywhere. We just keep adding additional networks as we go. So
that's great.
And it's been on for about 1.5 years, 2 years now, I guess, when we started this. So, but I'm going to ask you a question, if
Sure.
you can. I would like to know just a little bit more about Arcane.
Sure.
And what you do, and so because I want to share others about this.
So Arcane Carolinas is a podcast that focuses on the folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird out of the Carolinas. And this makes for terrible radio, but it's funny because to get the tagline right, I did just have to grab a business card and flip it over to make sure I hit the... I always forget the myths. That's what I always leave off. So what we do is we take a historical lens and apply it to folklore and legends primarily out of the Carolinas. We've begun under our Arcane Destinations banner exploring stuff from other states as well, but primarily our show is focused on folklore and legends, and we look at where did this story come from? What does this story mean? Is it verifiably historically true? Is it more of a parable, right? Or is it more of a story that we're just supposed to learn from that's been passed down from generation to generation? I've described it to people in the past as, and we also try to highlight the towns that the stories come from and build them up as well, because I think that the people that are currently living in these towns are just as important as the stories. So it's a little bit like Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives meets Mythbusters, meets Ghostbusters, and he's like, and it's not that we're out to bust things, but we just want to like get to the bottom of like, okay, there's this great story. I'll use the example of The Devil and Hezekiah Jones, which is a story from Eastern North Carolina. It's one of our very early episodes. The nickel version is, and if you haven't listened to this episode, please cut your podcast off now. Spoilers ahead. The story goes that there was this unbelievably cruel man that was not kind to his family. And on his deathbed, the devil came and took him out of the house. And there were witnesses, his caretakers witnessed this. And I was like, do I believe that Satan himself came from hell, physically manifested, kicked in the front door, and dragged this guy out of his bed? Probably not. Yeah. Right? Probably that didn't happen. But let's look at, was this person real? Based on the information that we have from the legend, like it was supposed to take place in this one town. So I looked up the town. Well, the town exists. Let's look up the birth and death records. Okay. Guess what? He existed. He was a real person, and you can trace the genealogical records back to this individual, and then you start to look into like what other records are available through court records and stuff like that. You're like, oh, this was a bad man. And this was a dude that really did exist. So in my opinion, that became more of a parable, a modern day parable about like the implications of don't be cruel to the people in your life lest this horrible thing happen to you. Yeah. Right? So that's the very nickel version of one story, but then I'll share another story that I do believe there's some weird stuff going on that can't, I don't mean weird in a negative way. I mean weird in a like, oh, this is paranormal and I can't explain that. I can't explain that away. Is the Cowee Tunnel disaster in Dillsboro, North Carolina, where a bunch of prisoners drown in a river, and now there's strange occurrences during the construction of a railroad tunnel. And now there are many, many strange occurrences around that tunnel. And I'm like, okay, well, we've got this historical tragedy that we can tie to this location that has unexplained phenomena repeatedly occurring in this. All right, from a historical perspective, I know it happened. I know that people say weird things keep happening at this location that can't be explained. I'm going to go ahead and say that's a case of the unexplained. And I'm not going to ever say, and my co-host Michael Williams, who isn't here today, it's very important to communicate when talking about our show. We will never claim to be the keepers of unknown truth. Like, we are not going to be the ones that crack the code on what a ghost is or isn't or whatever. Like, that's not our job, right? Our job is to just, from where we see it, is to preserve history and to look at these stories from a historical context.
That's interesting. And I appreciate you having this podcast to bring up the history. You know, for me personally, I've been to any place you mentioned in the paranormal, I've probably been there. And I usually, when I'm doing filming or when I'm doing an appearance, I always begin by telling them, don't tell me anything about the history, because when I go in there, I'm actually going to have tour guides, and they're going to share with me, and then you can share with me later about the validations that I received. But going to historical places for me has always throughout my life has always been fascinating. Partly because I just enjoy hearing about the actual history of the location. But the other part is because when I went in there, I would literally see, it's like they're showing me, those that were there showing me how it was, or they were showing me. One quick example I have is in Springfield, Illinois, there's a house that Abe Lincoln lived in. And I'll never forget, I was a kid, I was in high school, maybe a freshman, and I remember I was with my dad and my brother, and we went on a tour, and we went up to the second floor of the house, and when we came around the corner, there was a desk in the corner, and standing next to this desk was I saw this image, this figure of this tall guy, and he's standing there, and he's in black, and I'm thinking, that's Abe Lincoln. Abe Lincoln is here. And I thought, well, this is his house. Why shouldn't he be? So, and I just watched him, and he wasn't saying, he's just watching people going by, and I thought, well, why is he here? You know, I know it's his house, but why is he here? And about that time, our tour guide told us, said, this desk right here was the original desk of Abe Lincoln's, and he spent a lot of time writing on this desk. And I thought, he's standing by his desk. That makes sense. But just with that moment, it just enhanced my yearning to want to know more about the house and the history of the house. So it was. I love history. I love going to, and especially when I actually had the opportunity to go there. So there's a lot of good places in North and South Carolina that's got a lot of history because of Civil War and Confederacy and things like that as well.
My family are great sports. I drag them all over the place. I'm like, all right, we're going to go look at this town today, and I'll tell you why when we get there, that kind of thing. And they're really good sports about that. But yeah, I really appreciate your lens on stuff, and thank you for being willing to talk.
Been a pleasure, and we're going to have fun today.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com, and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.
In that space above the glove compartment. This is riveting pre-recording talk that Michael's going to have to edit out. Yeah.